Today we're making Mapo roux-based beef, utilizing techniques from two great culinary cultures, bringing out the best of our wonderful ingredients. First up, like any good Sichuan dishes, we start by toasting the Sichuan peppercorn. Like most peppercorns, it is the skin that is full of flavour, and by toasting them, we're bringing out the best from the essential oils. And we cook the whole thing in the same pan, so whatever essential oils that's left behind will be mopped up by the beef, the holy trinity, and all our other ingredients. Once the kitchen smells like a Sichuan hot pot, stove off, pesto mortar, peppercorns in, and you go. The grinding motion will once again release the essential oils from the skin. Perfect. Set this aside. Now let the braising begin. Hot pan with leftover essential oils, high smoke point neutral oil. In this case, vegetable oil. Once the oil starts to shimmer, beef goes in. This is the sound you want to hear. And we cook them in batches to not crowd the pan and form one even layer to maximize the caramelisation, the Maillard reaction, stage one of any good braise, which would make the meat taste meaty. What differentiates this from boiled meat? Today we're using beef cheeks for this recipe, but you can use any braising joint. Short ribs, oxtail, brisket, beef chuck, dealer's choice. The caramelization of the meat directly in the pan is something rarely done in Chinese cooking. Of course, they achieve the Maillard reaction and caramelization elsewhere, sometimes by flash frying, sometimes by literally stir frying, sometimes by stir frying brown sugar in oil. But the objective of the exercise remains the same. If they're sticking in the beginning, it's absolutely fine. Give it time. Once they've caramelized, they'll release themselves. Beautiful. Once all sides are golden brown, take them out temporarily. Now, because beef cheeks are quite lean, so there's not much excess fat, but if you're using a fatty joint like short ribs, now is the time to skim off any excess fat. We lower the heat and we start to introduce the holy trinity of Chinese aromatic vegetables. First up, we grate some ginger. If you're familiar with braising in the French or Italian sense, just treat them as your carrots, celery, and onion. Ginger goes into sweat, and of course this will cool down the pan slightly as well. What we're trying to achieve here is that through heat, we're evaporating the water content from the ginger, removing the harshness and concentrating its flavor. And all those burnt bits from earlier, the moisture content from the ginger is now starting to deglass the pan, mopping up all the beautiful flavors. Next up, crush some garlic. And through sweating, the garlic will bring a lot of caramelized sweetness and depth. We'll mince some scallion. Once again, this will bring some sweetness and depth. Of course, we save the green for garnish later. And just like the mirepoix, we sweat them until they're translucent. As you might have noticed, I've not seasoned anything yet, bearing in mind the chili bean paste and the fermented black beans are quite salty. So I'd rather adjust after the addition. Now, once everything's translucent, we add the Sichuan fermented bean paste, which will give us a ton of umami, the spiciness, the depth, and the funky notes. Treat this as you would your tomato puree. We cook it out, evaporating a bit of the water content and the harshness. Now here we have some Chinese fermented black soybeans, something you would normally see in a black bean sauce, which is quite often added to Mapo tofu. Normally out of laziness I skip this part, but given how well black bean works with beef, we have to add it. Perfect. Now, normally at this point, I will add the chili oil, add the beef back, start the braising process, and you have dinner. But today we do something different. How many times have you had Mapo tofu with an enormous layer of fat floating to the top? Nothing wrong with that, but the fat is never fully integrated into the dish. Today, using some French technique, we are going to make the chili oil here, and we are going to make a roux that binds everything together. So each bite has a bit of everything. And to do that is extremely simple. We first add some chili powder, whatever chili powder you fancy, and we top it up with a bit more fat. If you've skimmed off some beef fat, now is a good time to add a tiny bit back. And we stir to start toasting the chili powder, taking all the fat-soluble flavors with the oil. Now the fun begins. To this, we add some all-purpose flour. Cassie's whisk, we go. What's happening here is that the extremely flavoursome fat starting to coat each starch granule of the flour, preventing them from clumping, and we continue to stir to cook out the flour. And to this mixture, we add round 1 of our toasted Sichuan peppercorn, once again, to let the essential oil bind with the starch. And Sichuan peppercorn, cooked over a long period of time, is a completely different ballgame. You lose almost most of the numbing sensation, and you get a ton of depth. Now, once you no longer see any visible white dots, we start to incorporate the liquid. In this case, cold water. You can use stock, you can use dashi, as long as it's cold. Because once you add the water, the starch granule of the flour starts to swell, gelatinizing, thickening in the process. The cold water would slow down this process, buying yourself more time to stir, to prevent clumping. Once you have a bit of thickness, just like you would in a mapo tofu, we add a bit of soy sauce. This is 50-50 light and dark mix. Light brings the salinity and the umami. Dark brings the depth and the color. Of course, if you could only use one though, use light. Can't differentiate the oil from the liquid anymore, huh? And this technique works with a braising joint like beef, less so with tofu, just because the roux really needs a bit of time to cook out the flour, to really let the flavor shine. And with mapo tofu, it's an instant dish. It makes no sense to braise your tofu for 30 minutes. Here we need at least 3 hours. It's perfect for the roux. Now, add some Shaoxing wine. If you don't have Shaoxing wine, you can use dry sherry. This again brings a lot of umami and depth. Freeze this and you have mapo roux for 6 months in your freezer. And because during the roux making, you're toasting the flour, you're actually building a lot more flavor. It's not just a thickener, like you would adding a cornstarch slurry or potato starch slurry. Bit by bit, more water. And bear in mind, as a roux simmer, it loses some of its binding capabilities. So while this looks too thick at the moment, in 3 hours, it will look just right. If you thin it to the consistency you want now, in 3 hours time, it'd be too thin and you will have to reduce the whole thing. Now we taste and adjust the seasoning. Beef goes back in. Like I said many times, when it comes to braising, stacking efficiency is of vital importance because that determines how much dilution you have to do. In this case, 1 layer, meat juices, they go back in. And we top up with more water to cover everything. Now the cooking time depends, of course, on your cut of beef and the desired texture. In our case, with the cheeks this size, I'll see you in 3 hours. After 3 hours, we have this beauty. Look at that. The meat is no doubt tender given the cooking time, but just look at the viscosity. It's not yet fully coating, but it's partially coating the back of my spoon already. And that's the power of the roux. And only minimal visible oil floating to the top. As we mentioned, the binding capabilities deteriorate with time. So now, we simply fish out the beef and reduce it down to the consistency that we desire. Be very careful now with the beef because they'll start to fall apart. If you were to reduce it with the beef, they would literally fall apart during reduction. So that's why we're fishing them out, giving them a bit of time to rest, to relax their protein fibers. Now, bring in some heat. Oh, just look at the texture. Now, once it's properly coating the back of your spoon, stove off, and we add the world's smallest dash of Chinese black rice vinegar. You can use balsamic as well, just to bring a bit of balance, but you should not be able to detect the vinegar. Another round of Sichuan peppercorn, this time to really numb the spiciness. First round, the scallion green re-preserved. Everything together. Of course, this is the opposite of authentic. Not Mrs. Chen's mapo, but maybe Mrs. Chenot's. Now, we plate this on a plate because we can, because it doesn't need a bowl. Just look at that. One more round of Sichuan peppercorn for garnish. You first want the numbing, then the spiciness, of course. And that is mapo roux braised beef.